Let's join Heather and our instructional leadership coach, Dr. Erin Van Acker, as they talk about this week's high leverage practice.
Welcome to Little Bits of TLC, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of education. Join our host, Heather Volchko, as this season we focus on high leverage practices, HLPs. Each episode will examine a different HLP, essential strategies designed to enhance teaching and improve outcomes across various educational settings. These practices focus on collaboration, assessment, social, emotional, behavioral support, and instruction, benefiting all K-12 students. I hope you're ready to be both challenged and inspired, because this season is all about mastering the HLPs. This is Little Bits of TLC. Looking for something that actually fits your life? TLC University is here for that. Each week, we spotlight something different. A webinar with real-world insights, a hangout-style interview, and a hands-on workshop or a Q&A where we answer your questions. It's flexible, it's self-paced, and most come with CEUs. So whether you're looking to grow, reflect, or just listen in, there's something here for you. And it's all in one place. university.thresholdlearning.org. That's where you'll find show notes, professional blogs, a full catalog of ACE-accredited courses, and downloadable resources. It all just keeps growing. So whether you're walking the dog, commuting, or taking a breather between the daily grind, TLC University meets you where you are. Head to university.thresholdlearning.org and check out what's new this week. See you then.
Teachers assess individual student needs and adapt curriculum materials and tasks so that students can meet instructional goals. Teachers select materials and tasks based on student needs, use relevant technology, and make modifications by highlighting relevant information, changing task directions, and decreasing amounts of material. Teachers make strategic decisions on content coverage, like essential curriculum elements, meaningfulness of tasks to meet stated goals, and criteria for student success.
For this high leverage practice, we're talking about adapting curriculum tasks and materials for specific learning goals. And Erin, I know in your background, you have led a lot of this in your classroom setting. So for you, what does this practice look like?
I have done so much with this. It's hard to even just narrow it down to this little response, right? I think I really pulled a lot from Universal Design for Learning, so UDL. And just, I think even beforehand, when I started as a general education teacher and I didn't know about UDL, we talked all the time about differentiation, or within some of our groups, right? So really just pulling is just making sure that every student is able to access the curriculum, that they can engage with it in a way that's meaningful for them, and so that they can reach the outcomes of the goals for the lessons. And then trying to find different ways for them to demonstrate their knowledge, right? So that they can show that, yes, I have learned all of these goals and outcomes that the lesson was planned for, even though it may not be in the exact same way for every single student. And it can go as grandiose or as little as possible, right? So you might just make a couple of tweaks to lessons for specific students that you know need it, or you can what I did a lot of times was I really kind of just generated everything that I did in the classroom based on having like different levels or different methods for interacting with the curriculum so that my students could kind of pick and choose what was right for them.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then you can hit a wide variety of learners just naturally by how you're running your classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a little bit of time and dive into each tasks and materials because it is a little bit different. So I think sometimes materials can be a little bit easier to go after because it's what a lot of people, when they think of adaptations, they sort of think of changing the stuff that our students are interacting with. So can you walk us through what are some of those examples of adaptation specifically to the materials that we're using in our instruction?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you have the materials that can be providing graphic organizers, highlighting different parts of like their text or what they're reading, making sure that they have manipulatives. Some students you can use calculators or other assistive technology to really make sure that they have what they need to engage with the lesson or the task at hand. So it's making sure they have what they need to fill those gaps, right? Or to really support them in being able to interact with that material.
Thank you. So then when we're talking about the tasks, I mean, sometimes the materials that we are, either required to use or they're kind of like driving what tasks we're doing, but sometimes we get to be a little bit more creative with those materials because the tasks are a little bit more locked in. So, walk me through for that instructional task that we have to get our students through. How do you adapt what that looks like?
Yeah. So as far as the task goes, I mean, I would kind of look at it a lot years ago with multiple learning styles, right? It was a kind of a huge thing, which I don't think it was ever really fully research backed. But for some reason, I kind of like not dug into it, but I like the idea of just making sure that you're presenting things differently or that students can engage with materials differently, right? Because we do all learn in different ways. But so maybe for the curricular tasks, it could be one student might be engaged in writing, right? One student could be doing a project or making, a slide deck to demonstrate their knowledge, or students could be doing kind of an artistic diorama or some sort of representation, right? That then they'll provide a oral presentation to the class. And then it could be down to anything like even just let's say a math worksheet, right? Like you might reduce some of the questions for some students, or you might alter what some of those skills are that they need to demonstrate for that math test. So maybe some students don't have the prerequisite skills. So you're going to really kind of focus on that first for them and then help guide them towards the ultimate goal. And then some students might be at a higher level. And so you can provide kind of expansion, right? So, what are some more critical thinking questions or tasks that they could do?
Thanks, because like there's so many different angles that we can take with this, and it's not, this student needs this during this activity or this type of task, or when we're using these kinds of materials, or they find these materials helpful when they're doing this kind of a task, right? Like there's so
Mhm.
many different permutations and combinations of what this can actually look like for a student to be successful. So in your like across all of the different ways that you have supported, I think your students in your classroom and even practitioners that are trying to support their students, how do you help them figure out what to go with? I mean, there's so many choices and each student has so many different needs. How do we even dream up what might be possible to unlock that learning with each student?
Yeah, I mean, it can be so much, right? I think a lot of teachers do just have natural tendencies and can kind of really figure out what it is or how to adapt their curriculum materials, but they may not feel that they can do that on their own, right? If they've, especially if they're doing very explicit teaching, they may not feel that they can kind of go outside the bounds of that, right? To really provide students with something that's different from what their curriculum says to do. But I think, those go hand in hand. I think really looking at what are some major issues that you're seeing, or is there something that you're seeing a student really struggle with? And what is that, right? Maybe a student really struggles when it's writing. So if the goal of the lesson isn't to see like what they can actually write, so can they do a speech to text?
I like how you're talking about this though, because it makes us as practitioners think about what is it that I'm actually looking for and what is it that's just kind of extra. So not that anything in our instruction is like just extra and just, not necessary, but when we're trying to really gauge student performance, there's what we are explicitly looking for. And then there's all those other things that sort of come with that. And it's one of
Right.
those like what I'm hearing you say, I think, is like it doesn't always have to. And so as long as we can just know explicitly what are we trying to get this student to demonstrate, anything outside of that, then that's where we get to be creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think even just in the more simple context of that, right? A lot of times with math, I'll see teachers really struggle to provide students with calculators to do the work. Well, unless you're actually working on computation of like one digit or simple two-digit numbers, you can use a calculator, right? If I'm working on order of operations in algebra, all I need to demonstrate is that I know order of operations, not that I can also do like that I can compute the numbers in my head, right?
Man, and so many times do I hear teachers be like, "Well, they don't have calculator in their accommodation, so they can't use a calculator on this activity." I mean, this is so much bigger than does the kid have a 504 plan? Does the kid have an IEP? This is me as a practitioner. How am I adapting my materials, my instruction, what I'm asking my students to do so that they can learn, right? Like we have learning goals. The goal is for them to hit those goals. So like how do you walk
Absolutely.
how do you walk practitioners through seeing it that way? That it's not just locked into those legal documents that say this is what this kid has to have or needs to have, but really, like, as a practitioner, I can be creative in how I'm helping my student access their learning and further their learning.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just helping them understand that we're here to support student learning, right? We're here when we're creating lessons or, using curriculum given to us. There are those specific goals. So as long as the student is demonstrating, like learning and demonstrating that specific goal, there's so much playroom, right? To really be creative with how can we get them to that end goal, right? Like that can look different. And I think that makes teaching more fun too. Like it gets so boring. And I think that's always the where teachers look down on explicit instruction, right? Is because it seems very rote and it can be. But you can also play within that as well, right? But yeah, it's like I think that's just where the creativity in teaching and the fun really lives.
And in a day and age where we're living in so much scripted curriculum and scripted intervention, where it's, teacher reads these letters, students say those letters, right? Like, gosh, it can really feel like a lot of the creativity within, like that art of instruction has really been somewhat strategically kind of removed. And I mean, like, we can go
Mhm.
down the conversation of, the pipeline of educators coming in and all the teacher prep and all of that for sure. But the reality is, we still have students that still have diverse learning needs, and we are still adults, staff coming in, trying to figure out how to support them to meet those learning goals. I mean, if
Yeah.
you worked with, I'm thinking like teacher leaders or maybe like building administrators or curriculum, coordinators, those types of folks that are both like they're responsible for making sure that staff have the right materials and that they're
Mhm.
equipped to be able to, hit those learning goals with those students on those, correct scope and sequence pieces, but also see kind of that art within instruction. Where is that room for practitioners to play and really figure out what those student needs are and meet them in those creative ways? Have you walked that space with those folks too?
I have some, and honestly, I will say where I think I had the most impact is when I was myself co-teaching. So I
Mm.
was a resource teacher at the time, but I co-taught with especially one of our like first year teachers, gen ed teachers. And we had a lot of students with high minutes in her classroom. So I was in there for all of math and science. And we co-taught every single class together for that. And I think it really helped to demonstrate, like we would do like our very explicit whole group instruction, and then we break out into centers. And we'd always do one of us would stay like on the rug or at a separate table for any students who weren't quite ready for that independent work yet and needed a little bit more support with the we do, right? So they needed a bit more scaffolding to help them learn those skills, or maybe they were the ones working on some of the prerequisite skills. And a lot of times we let our students choose, like, if you need more support, I'm at the table. Like, I'm not telling which students have to come with me, but the students that needed that extra support would almost always choose to come get that extra support, right? And then within our centers, we would have differentiated work for each center, right? So we'd have different levels. And it was amazing to see like students almost always chose the level that was accurate for them. And yeah, sometimes like they would get done and want to, or you'd have those students who'd want to do every single level. Great. You're just getting more practice, right? You'd have some students that would want to challenge themselves. Also wonderful.
That's such a cool example because, like, your centers are so common in elementary school, but
Hmm.
especially leveraging that co-teacher model. But I leveraged centers in alternative ed high school, and, like, it works. And it's just the way that you can adapt and meet those different needs in, like, very systematic and structured ways so that you are kind of, like, managing organized chaos, but it works. And you're right, every single time, even the most resistant learners, they were still picking what was right for them. They were still even challenging themselves when they saw success at the level that they were successful in. Like, it's
Hmm.
really, really nice, and I love the student choice aspect of this. So many times when we talk about adaptations, it's staff picking what's appropriate for kids, and you're like,
Right.
"No, give them the smorgasbord of options, and then let them see, oh, that's useful for me. That's not useful for me." I mean, how many times when I'm planning an IEP, am I asking the student, this is your list. Is it still working for you? Do we need to make any adjustments? I noticed you haven't really used this, or you've started doing this. Do you want to just include that? Right? Like that student voice in all of
Hmm.
this is so incredibly important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really looking at that too, when you do have students who do have adaptations, right, in their IEPs, Like we had a student who would never use their communication device in the general ed setting, so it was like really digging in and asking those questions of why, right? But he was also able to communicate effectively without it. So then it's also looking at, does he need it in that setting then, right? And it's like we didn't want to take it away either, so he had it and he could use it if he wanted to, but then starting to look at like what are better methods for him.
So I think before we sign off today, I'm curious if you have any kind of thoughts or words of wisdom for those practitioners who are pinched in the middle of needing to navigate those mandates, the directives, the must do's, right? And still really being drawn to want to engage in that creative, figuring out learning together type of interaction with their students. How can they navigate really doing right by both?
I mean, I think it's really like you want to look at what are those core aspects of your instruction that you need to make sure you hit, right? And then once you do that, how can you build in some of that play or within some of that work, right? So the independent student work, like, are there ways that you can be more creative in what the students are doing or provide more options, right? Like, it could even be once they're done with an like part of the assignment, right? Like pick the key questions or tasks that they need to do to demonstrate that knowledge. And then what else can we do on top of that? And really, I think just being creative of how do you make sure each student can access, interact with, and demonstrate their knowledge in ways that are right for them. One thing I've seen a lot working in schools is really those gifted learners. And a lot of times I'll get called in and it's like, okay, like, yeah, we're struggling with these students with behavior, and I work a lot with that, or the lower level learner, the learners that need more support. But then they'll be like, well, then we have this student. I mean, he aces everything, but he won't do any of the work, right? And he's just sitting there all day and now he's becoming disruptive and really, like just really turning that classroom around, right? And I think that is really where you can be creative and play as well. It's like, okay, yeah, because that student's probably bored, right? If they can demonstrate everything and tell you everything while you're teaching the lesson, they've got it. So what else can you do, right? Like that's when I would look into like what extension projects can they do? Like what area of that lesson might they be interested in? Like if you're teaching a lesson on World War II, can they choose a mini subject within there and like do their own project or write a paper about it? Like we're really an area that they want to delve more into. And then maybe they can do a little mini lesson to the class on that. But really being creative with like what makes them tick and how can they still be engaged with that content maybe adjacently. But if they've already demonstrated all the skills they need to, can you further that for them, right? To really get that engagement going.
Thank you for acknowledging both sides of this. I think so often when we talk about adaptations, we typically talk about adapting down. And I am so thankful that in this conversation, you have challenged that thinking that it's not just adapting down, it's also adapting up. And it is going to change kid by kid, it's going to change subject by subject. And even then, across the trajectory of a student throughout their career, it will continue to change there as well. But as practitioners, we get to use the materials and resources that we have, but we get to do that in creative ways to meet our students where they're at in any given moment. So, thank you so much for leveraging your expertise here with me today and sharing all the different ways that you've seen this high leverage practice show up in your day to day.
Yeah, thank you.
Supporting students with emotional or behavioral challenges in a gen ed or resource classroom? Project Thrive is a 6-strand project built to help you do exactly that, with confidence and clarity. You'll learn how to set clear expectations, maintain student focus, encourage helpful behaviors, and respond early before things escalate. The content also covers practical strategies for managing challenging moments, leading your classroom with clarity, and creating a space where learning stays on track. Led by educators Ann Potter and Candace McCoy, Project Thrive blends evidence-based practices with practical tools you can start using right away. No extra prep, no fluff. If you're in a classroom, in the thick of it, and looking for support that makes a real difference, this course was made for you. If you support students with low incident needs, Project Base helps you design a consistent classroom built just for them. And if you're in a therapeutic or alternative setting, building something from the ground up, Project Onward offers the structure and tools to do it well. Head to university.thresholdlearning.org to learn more and start thriving today.
In the field of special education, one of the most crucial roles a teacher plays is adapting curriculum materials and tasks to meet the individualized needs of students with disabilities. Every student has unique goals outlined in their IEP, and it's the educator's job to ensure that the material is accessible and engaging. This often requires modifying how the information is presented. For example, teachers might highlight the most relevant information or simplify task directions to make the content more digestible. They might also adjust the amount or complexity of the material, tailoring it specifically to the needs of each student. When a student struggles with reading or processing information independently, teachers can make substitutions like audio taping the content, reading it out loud, or using other media to relay the same information. They may also work one on one with students to break down complex concepts. Simplifying text can involve creating abridged versions or providing summaries that still capture the essence of the content but make it more approachable. Key concepts might be emphasized by using tools like study guides or previews to help students retain the most important information. In addition to these adaptations, special educators often employ content enhancements, strategies designed to structure the material in ways that help students better engage with and retain information. Graphic organizers, for instance, offer a visual representation of concepts, showing how ideas are connected in a way that's easy to understand. These tools help students see relationships between ideas, whether they're hierarchical, comparative, or sequential. Thanks to the vast array of web based resources available, teachers can customize these organizers to suit their classroom's specific needs. Another effective strategy is guided notes. These are teacher prepared handouts that guide students through lectures by providing cues and spaces for them to write down key information. This not only keeps the students engaged, but also gives them a reliable model for taking notes that they can refer to later when studying for exams or assessments. It's an interactive way to ensure students are actively involved during lessons. Then, there are mnemonical devices, which are especially powerful for students who need help remembering large amounts of unfamiliar information. Whether it's through letter strategies, keyword methods, or pegword techniques, mnemonics create a bridge between new information and something more familiar, making it easier to recall facts or concepts. Again, teachers have access to numerous online tools to create personalized mnemonics tailored to their lessons. In short, special educators are constantly adapting and enhancing their teaching methods to ensure every student has the best chance to succeed. From modifying materials to employing strategies that make content more memorable, they're creating pathways to learning that are as diverse as the students they serve. In the US, the law mandates that individualized education programs, or IEPs, must be aligned with the grade level standards for the student, even if that student is performing below that level. This creates a unique challenge for special education teachers. As educators craft both long and short term goals, HLP 11, and design instruction to meet these goals, HLP 10, the use of curriculum adaptations becomes essential. These adaptations, broken down into accommodations and modifications, play a critical role in bridging the gap between where the student currently is and where they need to be to meet the standards. The most effective educators aren't simply selecting adaptations from a checklist, they're thinking strategically. They look at what each individual student needs and adjust accordingly, often leveraging key accommodations and modifications to ensure that students can access the curriculum in meaningful ways. This process helps drive both learning and behavioral success. What's especially important here is that the effective adaptations are not one size fits all. A skilled special educator draws from multiple sources of data, HLP 4, working collaboratively with colleagues, HLP 1, and family members, HLP 3, to create a comprehensive understanding of the student's needs. This collaboration ensures that the adaptations are targeted and impactful. Teachers then regularly monitor how well these adaptations are working, adjusting them as needed to maximize the student's learning outcomes, HLP 6. So it's not just about following the law, it's about being innovative and responsive to each student's unique journey. Adaptations are a dynamic tool that, when used thoughtfully, can open up real pathways to success for students with disabilities. Teachers who are effective at adapting curriculum materials and tasks know that it all starts with intentional differentiation. They don't just throw out the same lesson for everyone and hope it sticks. Instead, they carefully tailor their approach to meet each student's unique needs. For example, they'll take a close look at the task directions, identifying any complex vocabulary or long-winded sentences that might trip students up, and simplify these instructions. Pairing those directions with visuals can further support students, giving them a clearer picture of how to complete a task. Technology is also a powerful tool in this process, helping students grasp concepts that might otherwise seem out of reach. By using the right tech, teachers can make tasks more interactive and accessible. They don't stop at one strategy either. They know that combining multiple adaptations boosts the chances of student success. Whether it's cutting down the amount of contents students need to work through or adjusting the difficulty level of tasks to fit each student's readiness. They also make sure that the key information doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Whether it's in a text, a lecture, or a worksheet, they highlight the most important ideas so students know exactly what to focus on. Guided notes are another tool they use, giving students a structured way to follow along, while gradually helping them improve their own note taking skills over time. And let's not forget about graphic organizers. These are incredibly effective for showing relationships between ideas, and teachers don't just hand them out. They explicitly teach students how to use them and scaffold that learning. On top of that, mnemonic strategies come into play, giving students clever ways to remember the essential pieces of the lesson. Whether it's a catchy phrase or an acronym, these memory aids are key to helping students retain information long term. In the end, teachers who excel at adapting materials don't just help their students keep up, they empower them to succeed. One of the most important things school leaders can do to support their teachers is to ensure that educators have a solid understanding of the range of adaptations available to meet their students' individualized needs. This goes beyond just knowing the basics. It's about giving teachers the tools and knowledge to be flexible and creative in their approach. It's essential that teachers can identify and implement adaptations that fit not only the students' needs, but also the demands of the curriculum. This kind of strategic alignment is what leads to effective learning. For novice educators, it can be tempting to over-accommodate, providing too many supports without stepping back to assess whether those adaptations are really necessary. This is where school leaders come in. By guiding teachers to use data and regularly adjust their instruction, leaders help prevent over-accommodation and ensure that the focus stays on fostering independence and growth in students. It's also crucial for leaders to encourage their staff to think beyond the typical go-to accommodations, like extended time or preferential seating. Those can be useful, but there's so much more potential when teachers get creative. Leaders can challenge their educators to move beyond the pre-written lists and again, rely on data to evaluate whether the adaptations they're using are truly impacting students' performance in a meaningful way. That's where the real growth happens, when teachers are empowered to innovate and make decisions that directly connect to their students' success. Assessing the strength of research support for curricular and material adaptations is challenging due to the wide range of purposes these adaptations serve. Whether it's highlighting important content, simplifying task directions, or adjusting the amount and depth of material, adaptations are applied in various ways depending on individual student needs. This includes the use of instructional practices like graphic organizers, guided notes, and mnemonic devices, which can be employed either on their own or together. With such variability and a focus on ever-changing student outcomes, it's difficult to pinpoint a singular, comprehensive measure of their effectiveness. However, when we look at specific content enhancement approaches, there is enough empirical support to suggest that these strategies do make a positive difference in student learning. What remains to be explored more thoroughly is how these broader intervention packages of curricular adaptations are implemented. Key questions include: what types of adaptations are most effective? How do we ensure they are used with fidelity? And perhaps most importantly, what impact do these adaptations have on critical student outcomes? Further research is needed to determine which adaptations are not only effective, but also efficient and socially acceptable in various educational settings. The logic behind adapting instructional materials is clear. When teachers substitute, simplify, or highlight essential content, they increase the likelihood that all students, especially those with disabilities, will meet their learning goals. Yet, despite widespread recognition of this need, research shows that many teachers still fail to make the necessary modifications. This gap between understanding and action suggests that more attention should be directed toward the actual implementations of these instructional modifications, and importantly, how they influence student outcomes. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Join us next week when Heather sits down with our school psychologist, Lathrell Eiler, to talk about our next high leverage practice.
Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, consider dropping a like and follow Threshold Learning TLC on Facebook and Instagram. And if you like our show, share the podcast with your colleagues. A personal recommendation is by far the best way to promote the podcast. Let them know that they can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else they catch their podcasts. Just be sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. You can also email us at info@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. You can find everything you're looking for at thresholdlearning.org. See you there. Attention educators pursuing behavior analysis certification and universities preparing them for success. Supervision with TLC offers 100% remote fieldwork supervision designed specifically for school-based professionals. Educators can earn their hours right in their schools without leaving their classroom, all while being supported by experienced BCBAs who understand the realities of education. With month-to-month scheduling, affordable rates, and both live video and asynchronous chat, our fieldwork supervision model is designed to fit into your life, not the other way around. We also invite universities to enhance their graduate programs in partnership with our team of practicing school-based BCBAs. Our fieldwork supervision model keeps students on track for certification by helping them connect their practice to all exam domains so that they can confidently pass the exam. Explore more at university.thresholdlearning.org/supervision or email supervision@thresholdlearning.org to connect. Supervision with TLC, where educators grow into behavior analysts.